woke up in the middle of the night, a sense of unease gripping my chest like a vice. It was one of those moments when your instincts scream at you, telling you that something is profoundly wrong. I reached for my glasses on the bedside table and slid them on, peering around the room. The soft, diffused glow of the streetlights outside filtered through my curtains, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I'd lived in this apartment for years, and the cityscape beyond my window was a familiar sight. Rows of buildings, each with their own stories and secrets, stood silent in the darkness. But tonight was different. All the lights in the neighboring apartments had been extinguished, leaving only the faint radiance of the streetlights to pierce the obsidian night. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear nothing but the faint hum of the streetlights outside. It was as though the entire city had fallen into a deep slumber, and I was the sole witness to this nocturnal stillness. I moved closer to the window, pressing my face against the cool glass. My breath fogged it up for a moment, and when it cleared, I was met with a chilling sight. The buildings around me, once bustling with life, now stood as silent sentinels, their windows dark, their facades foreboding. It was as though the entire population had vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a city trapped in a perpetual midnight. The unease that had settled in my chest grew into a gnawing fear. I glanced at the clock on the wall, its hands frozen in time. It was as if time itself had stopped in this forsaken place. Then, in the midst of the silence, I heard it, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. Footsteps, faint but unmistakable. They echoed through the empty streets, their rhythm deliberate, almost mechanical. I strained my eyes to peer into the darkness, trying to discern the source of the approaching sound. And then, they emerged from the shadows, figures that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Their movements were unnatural, disjointed, as though they were marionettes being manipulated by some unseen puppeteer. Their silhouettes were twisted and grotesque, and as they drew nearer, my heart threatened to leap out of my chest. Fear washed over me in a cold wave. I knew I had to get out of there, away from whatever those things were. I scrambled out of bed, my hands trembling as I pulled on a coat and hastily laced up my shoes. The footsteps were growing louder, more insistent, as if they were closing in on me with purpose. I stumbled out of my apartment and into the dimly lit hallway. The building, too, was eerily quiet. No voices, no laughter, just the hollow echo of my own footsteps as I descended the staircase. The figures were drawing closer, and their presence filled me with a primal dread. Outside, the city had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and uncertainty. I ran through the winding streets, my breath ragged, my heart a relentless drumbeat in my chest. The figures pursued me with unyielding determination, their grotesque forms illuminated only by the feeble glow of the streetlights. The city that had once been my home had become a nightmare, a place of terror and despair. Familiar landmarks twisted and contorted in the darkness, disorienting me as I sought refuge from my relentless pursuers. But just when I thought all hope was lost, I stumbled upon an old, decrepit library tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. Its ancient doors creaked open at my touch, revealing a cavernous interior filled with dusty tomes and forgotten knowledge. It was as though the library itself had been untouched by the passage of time, a sanctuary frozen in its own history. I hurried inside, my footsteps echoing in the silence. In the dim light, I spotted an old book, its pages yellowed with age. I grabbed it from the shelf and flipped through its fragile pages. The text was cryptic, written in a language I couldn't quite place, yet it held a promise of escape from this nightmarish reality. With trembling hands, I followed the instructions laid out in the book, a series of arcane rituals and incantations that seemed both surreal and desperate. Time seemed to blur as I performed the ritual, the words rolling off my tongue in a language I couldn't understand. Outside, the figures drew nearer, their distorted forms visible through the library's windows. But I pressed on, my desperation lending me a determination I hadn't known I possessed. And then, it happened. A A brilliant, blinding light engulfed me, and I felt myself being pulled as though by some unseen force. The figures let out a chorus of eerie, otherworldly cries as I was wrenched away from them. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in a place bathed in soft, golden light. I gasped for breath, my body drenched in sweat, and my heart still racing. I had escaped the clutches of that malevolent city, but the memory of its haunting emptiness would forever linger in the darkest corners of my mind, a constant reminder of the horrors I had witnessed. As I looked around at the serene, unfamiliar landscape that now surrounded me, I couldn't help but wonder if I had traded one nightmare for another, or if I had stumbled upon a new reality altogether, one where the rules of time and space were forever altered, and where the echoes of that forsaken city would continue to haunt me in my dreams.